Broad topics, broad minds, broad hosts, but not just for broads. This is BROADScast with Kim Goldman and Jackie McDougall.
Welcome to BROADScast. Hi, Kim.
Hi, Jackie McDougall.
We're sharing a mic today. It's like we're like the broadcast version of Lady and the Tramp. I'll be the tramp.
Oh, the spaghetti. I got it.
Yeah.
I thought I was the tramp. That's how you welcomed me this morning. You called me a whore. Welcome, hi, whore.
I didn't realize that was going to make it onto. Anyway, so we have a very important episode today. Even though we're starting a little bit vulgar, we're not going to be. I promise. We are doing a show, and I've been wanting to do this for quite some time. April is Autism Awareness Month, right, with April 2nd being World Autism Awareness Day.
It's also Jackie McDougall Day.
It is Jackie McDougall Day because it's my birthday. And honestly, there's not a day that I would be more honored to share. For those who may not know, I have a child on the autism spectrum, my oldest, who's almost 13, and it's very, very important to me to talk about autism in a way that people understand. You know, if we're going to talk about autism awareness, let's not have a show where it's all inside baseball. You know what I mean? Where it's like talking about things like ABA and, where people are like, I don't know ABBA. I liked them in the 70s. Like, we need to talk about it in a way. It took me a long time to figure out what an IEP was. Yes, ABAs and IEPs and all those other letters.
Individualized Education Plan.
So we have some guests today who are going to help us out and educate and inform and I think entertain a little bit too, because these broads are awesome. We have Shannon Penrod. Shannon, welcome to the show.
Welcome. I'm so excited to be here.
From Autism Live. You are just making things happen over there.
Well, we talk about autism a lot. That we do.
It's your thing.
It is our thing.
And we also have Yvonne Johansen, who is the creator of My Little House, which if you have a child on the spectrum or you have a child in your life at all through the ages of what?
I say it's perfect for 2 and up.
2 and up.
Typically developing 2 to 5.
Awesome. And it's a great toy. It's not electronic. We need to start there because how refreshing that we're giving something to a 2-year-old and up that is not electronic. So we're going to talk a little bit later in the show about My Little House and how you can get involved and all that good stuff, because I think it's really important. So Kim,
what?
I want you to, I'm directing you here. You like this? But I want you to be a huge speaker and question asker and make the points of possibly someone who doesn't have a child on the spectrum or work with children on the spectrum. So we can really take Autism Awareness Month and World Autism Awareness Day. Is that actually what it's called? World Autism Awareness Day?
Yeah.
Oh, it is today anyway, if it's not. We want to do it so we're really creating awareness and not just talking to those people who've been there, done that. Okay. So you are very, very important to this process. So,
all right, let's do this.
All right. So one of the things I would like to start with is I hear all the time people are like, what is autism? Like, how do I know if my kid, my grandkid, my neighbor has, what the heck is it? Shannon, can you kind of...
Well, depending on who I'm talking to, I say it's a neurological difference. That especially when I'm talking to younger kids, I'll say to them, do you ever play on a computer? That some computers are Macs and some computers are PCs, and they both do amazing things. They just do them in different ways. And that, the neurotypical people in the world are maybe PCs, and people who are on the autism spectrum are Macs. They still have an operating system, but it's functioning in a different way. They sense things in a different way. They respond to things in a different way. They're still capable. It's just a difference. So that's the way I language it.
No, I love that. I feel the same. Every child that I work with, I do different things with, because every child on the spectrum is a child on the spectrum. They're all so different. So depending on that particular child, I do a series of different things and things that really kind of what's in their comfort zone, I think. And the other thing is the connections that we make with our kids all kids, but especially kids on the spectrum, are key. I mean, that's the key for me is once I connect, you've got it. You've got them.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's...
So let's go back a little bit, because I don't know that people know what you do in your not only do you have My Little House, which is amazing, you are a speech therapist. So how did you get into that, and is that what you're doing mostly, are kids on the spectrum or with special needs?
Yes. So I have been working as a speech therapist for over 30 years, a long time. And
Fourth grade you started?
I've done every grade, but I started off doing early intervention. That's what I started as a grad student, as 0 to 3. And that to me was the most rewarding work that I've done. Because I felt that connection early. Yeah, early intervention is the best because you're getting the kids early. You start the therapy early. You bring in other professionals early. But then I went from that to working in school districts. We started out in New York, moved out here. I worked for Lanterman for a while, have my own private practice for a while, worked in every school district for myself as a contractor with my agency. And now I'm actually working for a school, a charter, great charter, in Hollywood, and I work with kids from kinder to middle school. And the work is the same. The population is very different, though. I feel like when I first started out, the numbers were so much lower. I started in the 80s, the late 80s, and my caseload was always a good size, but not like now.
Why do you think the numbers were lower back then as compared to where they are now?
I think it's a couple of different things. I think the way we're diagnosing earlier, I think we're just a lot more getting in early. I think parents have so much more information than they've ever had before, which is good. And then it's a little overwhelming, I think, too, for some parents. There's just so much out there. But I think getting in early, like just baseline knowledge is just so much different. And I just feel like, the children on the spectrum, I feel like the numbers, there's no denying that it has skyrocketed.
Do you think that our school administrators are trained better or differently than they were? I feel like there's an opportunity for the schools to pay a little bit different attention, whereas parents, we may just think, oh, they're just not on that. They just haven't reached that milestone yet because they're not moving along. I know Jackie talks a lot about Kobe not talking early, and you and your family kind of dismissed it a little bit, not really knowing that it was something attached to that, or that Correct. It had a deep. I mean, I have people in my life that I wonder. Do you think that schools are more equipped to be able to help identify kids that may be in need of additional services, or I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, to be honest with you, I worked for almost every different district, so I can say there were some that I worked in. It was a very short period of time because I didn't agree with the way things were run, and those were very, like a year, and I was gone. But I would say there is a change in the way school districts are approaching special education. I think special ed back in the day was like nobody discussed special education. It was just like, oh, you're the special ed team. And we were just kind of pushed aside. I don't feel that anymore. I think we're a very big part of the school. Mainstreaming is what it's all about. And I think there are many districts that are on board. And the ones that aren't, there are some still. But
yeah.
Well, and I just wanted to add to that, it's such a pleasure to be here with you because I think you're the kind of professional that we all hope to find in our kids' classrooms. Because my credentials that I bring to this table, I'm an autism mom. I have a son who's on the spectrum who's 13 and a half. But I'm a former teacher who was in classrooms. And I've experienced things sometimes when we've been at school with people who weren't like Yvonne, and how heartbreaking that is. I think autism is expensive, and it costs schools a lot of money. And I think a lot of times, not to get too political, but we haven't funded the special education programs the way that we were supposed to and the way that it was promised. And so schools are forced to do a tap dance to try to figure out, all right, we've got this much money for these many kids. We can't give them all what they need. So how do we shortchange part of these kids? And it's a really difficult process for parents. And we have a lot of parents, especially in hard-hit communities, where you would think that somebody in the school district would have said something, but honestly, they're afraid to. They're afraid to because of the legal ramifications if the parent gets upset. And then there's what's it going to cost us if we identify this child as somebody who needs services that we can't provide. So I don't think that any parent should wait for the school district to tell them there's a problem going on.
Right, but if you don't know what it looks like, or
when you don't have a doctor, I mean, we were extremely lucky. At 12 months, my son wasn't talking, like didn't have, I mean, not a lot of kids are. So clearly the doctor saw something that wasn't progressing, that we didn't know the milestones. So 12 months, it was like, hey, you know, let's go have a hearing test. Like, let's just kind of keep an eye on this or whatever. And so we did a hearing test, and that was okay. So then at 18 months, it was like, you know what, we're going to head over and send you to a speech therapist. Like, you know, here are some of the things that you can be doing. So this is what I find amazing are the ways that they taught me to communicate with my child if he wasn't speaking. So instead of having him, you know, say he wants milk or something and he can't ask for milk, he would have to do so. And I you know, we can read our kids so much so that we start to put it on ourselves as moms. Like, oh, I think I'm coddling him so much and I'm getting him what he needs. He just doesn't have to use his words. And we come up with all these excuses. And so they taught me how to have him do something to ask. So whether it was like pat his lips or snap his finger, not, you know, or clap his hands or something. And you'd say, oh, do you want milk? You know, do this. And it was something super easy that he could do to get him to start to mimic, because that's one of the things that he was not doing. Like if he was 9 months old, he should be able to go, you know, and you don't think about that. Yeah. And he wasn't doing any of that. He wasn't really even clapping his hands. You know, there were certain things that I would have never, ever thought. And this doesn't mean, you know, if you're listening, that if your child's not clapping their hands, that they have autism, but it's just to open up the conversation that, hey, this is a developmental milestone that my child isn't necessarily hitting. Talk to your doctor. And I found that our doctor, thank God, and I wish I could remember her name, because we lived somewhere else. I'm gonna find it because she deserves all the kudos in the world. Sent us here and then introduced us to the regional center, you know, which is the North LA County Regional Center.
I was just going to say that.
I thought was like, hey, oh, is that where, you know, disadvantaged families, you know, go and get service? Like, no. These are services that we have a right to for our children that we pay for with our taxes.
No, and I'm always amazed when I work with families and going into homes and how long it took them when the mom and the dad knew early, like this isn't right, you know, something's off. And when a parent says that, you have to listen. You know that you know better than anybody. You know in your heart of hearts. And the regional center is really the biggest gift. It's for everybody, and it's a service that 0 to 3, you go in. They will do the testing. Your child doesn't speak. They'll do the testing. They start typically with the speech pathologist comes in first. Yep. And then from there, they qualify for the services. Then you're bringing in a team of people because typically there's other things that you could be working on. Then you're going to get the occupational therapist involved. And now she's working on some fine motor skills. And she's doing that. Sometimes we bring the physical therapist in too, if it's big muscles. And, you know, there's the walking. And so there's a series of steps. But the first step is this SLP comes in. And I really feel like it happens so often that my parents will say, you know, I just didn't know. And then I asked and I talked to the preschool teacher and she said, this is okay. And we have 2 languages at home and they were both emerging, or, you know, and I always say to my parents, you gotta, you know, as a parent, and you don't have to be a speech pathologist. There's something wrong. This not this, even if it's your first one. And there's so much more information now than when I was a young mom. And there's a lot of information. Sometimes it's a little overwhelming because you don't know where to look because there's so much. But when you get on the internet and you start fishing around for, you know, early milestones, everything comes up. Right. And I just feel like that the regional center, and they're all over, that is the biggest gift.
But how do you... because Jackie and I've had this conversation. I had someone in my life that I because I've been around. I used to work for Best Buddies, and so I've been trained, and I know what it looks like. But I had someone in my life that I thought maybe their child was on the spectrum, and I remember saying, like, how do I say something? Do I suggest something? How do I? And I was uncomfortable, and I was afraid it was going to impact the relationship. And you just said something about, you know, the schools are afraid. I think you said it. Schools are afraid. They don't. How do we do that? How do we do that?
Members also asked. Nancy had asked the same thing. Do you tell somebody?
Yeah, and it's hard. And I know for me, I had a sense that my child was speaking very early and meeting all of his milestones, and things were going well. And then my child started slipping away little by little. That I used to say that it was like I would go in and put him to bed at night, and it was like a thief would come in and steal just a little piece of him, just enough so that the paranoid mom went, hey, you know, somebody rearranged things. And I would say to everybody in my life, you know, he was saying more words yesterday than he was today? And everybody would say, it's just you. He's a boy. Boys talk later. You're an older mom. You waited so long. You're a helicopter mom. It's just you. And I would go to all of my friends and say, do you see anything? No, he's fine. It's just you. He's fine. Until he got to the point where he was completely nonverbal and he couldn't play with other kids, and he was banging his head on the kitchen floor. And then one friend had the guts to say to me, you know what, honey, you've been saying for a long time, you feel like something's going on. I just want to say to you, I feel that way too.
But you are an anomaly, because not most people wouldn't be as curious. I mean, I would be. I wouldn't. I think.
What do you mean?
Well, I mean, you were asking everybody, is there something different? Do you notice something different? And like, a lot of people don't do that. They're inward, and they keep it to themselves, and maybe there's some fear, maybe there's shame.
There is fear.
So you were
I was putting it out because I'm that
Yes.
way. But I know, and I talk to moms every day. They have an inkling. They have an inkling inside that something's going on. They don't want to label it as being bad, and they don't want it to be. They don't want to sit in judgment of their kid, so they're afraid. I think what a lot of parents, and you jump in, Jackie, for what you felt, but I think a lot of parents don't want to ask the question. But I do think that they sense that something's going on. I always thank the friend who finally had the strength to say to me, because I probably would have waited until he was 4, and him getting intervention when he did, I think, made so much difference.
Right.
But for the parent that doesn't put it out there, and then you have the friend that maybe thinks it's something.
Yeah.
What do you suggest in that situation? Like my situation, I had a friend that was completely oblivious. I'm fairly certain. And it was our kids were close, and there was definitely some differences between our kids. And you can chalk it up to just one being quirky, which is such a strange word to use, but that's usually how, their kids are defined at that age. They're just quirkier. So what do you say to the people that weren't like you?
Well, I'm interested to see what you say, but when I see something like that, or when somebody asks me, I've got a friend, what should I do? I say to them, if you care about this friend, you have to risk the friendship and say, I want to share with you some things that I know, and I want to tell you about 1 or 2 resources so you don't overwhelm them, but say, I'm concerned, and they're going to be mad. I was mad at the friend who said to me, I'm with you. I think something's going on. I was furious.
Even though you thought that.
Yes, I was furious with her,
Someone
but I thank her.
it.
I think she may have really saved us, and I thank her every day now. So I think if it's really a friend, you have to be willing to risk the friendship. And I know it's easy for me to say that because I'm on this side of it, but I think you should say something.
Yvonne,
I was just going to say very similar. Just because I'm usually the first one in, and we're not the ones that make the diagnosis. Speech therapist does not. But I know. I know going in, like light language, and then you just start checking off all the boxes. And then 9 times out of 10, that mother will come to me or that father and say, what do you think? Is my kid on the spectrum? What do you think? And in my early days, we were told you never say. You just, you do what you got to do until that child is diagnosed, because you're not the one to make that diagnosis. I can't not say what I think. If someone's asking me what I think, I'm going to tell you what I think. But then I also, you tread lightly, because I really feel that parent, when they ask me, they already kind of know the answer. And so I'm kind of saying what I think, and I'm agreeing. And when I'm agreeing, I also say, look at what you've done. Look at where you are. You already have me in. You're doing everything early. And giving them the real information of early intervention, getting a team in, handling this, and figuring it out fast, as opposed to waiting and let's just see and don't worry.
Wait and see is such BS.
Oh.
So I agree with Shannon. I really do. You have to. You may get that. I've had parents get very upset with me and tell me off or tell me to leave. But I'm always I was asked to come back,
right?
Because once they realized that it was coming from a place of I care and we're trying to help.
I think early intervention is the most important thing.
Yes.
Because, my son at 18 months and then at 20 months, he started his social skills classes, his speech therapy, and all these things, and still nobody was saying the word autism. So he had started to do this. And then around 2.5, we were at my brother's house for 4th of July in Massachusetts, and he was staying inside because the fireworks. And still, I knew he had some delays and we're working on them, but still no one's saying anything about autism. And my cousin, who's she's educated in, I think, early childhood, and she actually has a daycare at her home, or, so, I mean, she didn't have kids at that time, or she had a baby at that point, but she called me up when we got back to California and was kind of talking to me about it. And I said point blank, are you telling me you think he has autism? And she said, yes. And I was angry. I think I was angry for a couple of reasons. First of all, I was like, what the hell does she know? Because it was painful. But I was also angry that nobody else was saying that word. All of these professionals in my life, and she didn't realize he had been going for early intervention. Because I wasn't public about it, because I didn't know why he was going for early intervention. He just had some delays. So it's not like you can, jump up on a soapbox for, And so it wasn't until he was in kindergarten, 6 years old, that I was like, you need to, to the school. He's had early intervention since he was 20 months old. He's getting in trouble. He was getting in trouble because if you had to walk from the yellow table to the blue table, and the kids go from one to the other and they go direct. Not my kid. He's going to go around the class and touch whatever the pattern was that was going on in his head. And he would get put in the yellow, the behavioral chart thing constantly. Mm-hmm. Or, they're all watching the teacher this way. And then she turns to a different board and they all have to move their, turn their bodies on the mat and on the little rugs, and he was still looking the other way, and she'd have him move into the yellow. And I was like, hold on, he is becoming that kid, when this is not you need to be helping him, not making him that kid that everyone's like, oh, he's always in trouble. And he also was not, when you look at autism and the typical tantrums and things like that, he, instead of tantruming, can still go into another world or room or wherever he needs to be if this one is too overwhelming. And so Christmas parties and classrooms and things like that, he's so quiet that, if he's not disruptive, why do you have to fix it? As a teacher, they have so much going on. They have so many kids. So it was tough because, they wouldn't necessarily point him out because it would create more work. It would cost more money, all of the things that they have their hands tied. I can't even imagine what it's like to be a teacher in public education and feel like I have this kid and have to go to your administrator who's trying to figure out to the penny how they're going to pay for things. That's not a very popular position for a teacher.
No, it isn't. But as a teacher, and this is what we're supposed to do. We know there's something wrong. And usually my teachers are the first ones to say, Yvonne, something's off. I'm not really sure what it is. Can you take a look?
Right.
Sometimes, I'm getting that more than from the parents. By the time they get to school, if they haven't had EI and starting in kinder.
EI being early intervention.
Yes, sorry.
That's okay.
Speaking in that language. But sometimes the teachers, those are the front line, because now you're in the school system. Now you're in it. And that's their job is so important. I had the pleasure of working with LA Unified over the summer, doing some workshops, showing them my little house, but talking to the TK, so the transitional kinders, preschool program teachers. Now they know a little bit about language development, but they don't know, they're not speech pathologists and they're early educators, but every child is different. And so trying to give them, and all I wanted to give them was just like, you don't even know. You are so important. You guys are the front line. And by now they're in school, and you have to be the ones to get us in, or to start rocking the boat, and to say, can we get a screening? That's the first step, is you have a speech pathologist come in and does a screening. You get parent permission, you pull them out, or you're observing in the classroom. And then from there, it's like, okay, yes, we have to go into an assessment. We've got something here. It's not quite right. We've got to do some testing. 9 times out of 10, that child qualifies, not just for you, but now you're bringing in, because he qualifies for speech, so now he has that. Now you're opening the door for the OT, because she can't come in without me, which makes no sense to me, but there's a So once you get that individual educational plan going, this IEP going, you get that diagnosis of a SLI, so a speech language impairment. Mm-hmm. So that's in there. Now, who else do we need? Do we need the resource room specialist? Is this child falling behind academically? Is there? And typically, yes. Sometimes with reading, the pre-reading skills, they have the concepts, they're not getting them. The comprehension is not there. Attention is not there. If attention isn't there, nothing. So it's a process, and so they're the ones that really start the process going. They get it going, so they are key. I really feel like there needs to be more information to those teachers,
right?
Really,
and they need to be empowered. You know, I think it's parents and teachers both. It's really important to be empowered. So when you finally go back a little bit, so when you finally your friend confirmed your fears or agreed with your fears, then what happened next? Like, take us through that.
What was interesting was that I had a friend whose husband was working with kids who were on the autism spectrum. So I called her like 30 minutes after, I cried, and then I called her and I said, she says that she thinks something's going on, and I've wondered, and she had seen my child maybe 7 months before with her husband, and she said, he doesn't have autism. What are you talking about? I said, he's different now. Can your husband come and look at him? They came for dinner, and my husband, by the way, was mad. He was mad at everything. He was like, there's nothing wrong with our kid. My kid's fine, And so this friend came, and he got down on the floor and played with our child. And I, in my head, was like, it's all going to be okay. He's going to say, he's fine. And then, of course, when it was time to go, he said, I don't diagnose, but I think you need to start making phone calls. And, of course, my husband was like, he's never allowed back in the house again. What a horrible human being.
He's dead to us.
Yes. Maul him by a tiger. It was just not a great thing. But I didn't even know what the regional center was on that day. I'd never heard of it before. I'd never seen a billboard that said, if you're having issues, here's where to call. Yeah. That didn't exist. And
even doctors aren't always that educated when it comes to support and services.
Oh, and can I tell you, we went to the pediatrician. The pediatrician was one of the people that I said, he was talking more and he's losing language. I used that phrase. And she said, it's fine. Wait till he's 2. Wow. Yeah. So I love that you had a good pediatrician, because I say ha put to when I talk about my pediatrician, but yeah, it took us a really long time with the regional center. I love the regional center. I'm one of their biggest fans, but it's a process that you need. Through all of this, what a parent needs is somebody to hold their hand.
And a coat of armor.
Yes. Gird your loins. I had an IEP earlier this week. Same day I had a mammogram. I was like,
what do you hate yourself?
No. I was like, get it all over with. If I could have had a colonoscopy that day, I would have done that too. Get it done. you know.
You're like, this day already has gone to crap. I might as well have somebody feel me up.
It kind of they can't cancel each other out. I couldn't get as revved up about the IEP because I was like, I got to get to a mammogram, and I couldn't get all fatutzed about the mammogram because I was still thinking about what happened at the IEP. So it kind of was a good thing.
As long as you didn't confuse the two, that would have gotten very awkward.
You know,
Whip it out in the IEP. Anyone?
My BOOB in there.
yeah, there we go. But I wish that there's supposed to be a moment when a child is 1 and a child is 2 when they're at their doctor and the doctor does this pre-screening, and it's a very short thing that they do. I wish that then parents were forced to go to a consultation with an autism advocate who could just check things off and explain what was happening and what you would do next. Like when we think about what might happen if that were to happen, it would be powerful.
Yes.
But, unfortunately, insurance isn't rushing to do that because they haven't figured out the math on it yet. When they do, I think they will. Because the math is if you start early intervention, what that child will need across a lifetime is millions of dollars
Not
less.
with this presidency, Shannon.
Well,
Wait a couple years for that.
right.
Yeah.
But what is it, $2.4 million that they think across a lifetime for somebody who's on the autism spectrum if they don't have intervention?
Yes.
Whereas the intervention that my son had probably was around $240,000, which is a lot of money that the state of California paid for, but that's a lot less than $2.4 million. And he will be a taxpayer. So that $240,000 he will pay back.
That's a piece that I don't fully understand myself, is just like doing all of this early and doing it the right way. Not doing it where the speech therapist has 5 kids and, it becomes, because that's a whole other set of issues where there's just not enough SLPs, there's too many kids, and services are not always done the way that they should be done, the right way. But when things are done right, and that you just see more progress. Services are constantly, we're weaning them now. Now, instead of having speech 2 times a week for 60 minutes, they're down to 30 minutes. And before you know it, they're down to every other week. Right, and then before you know it, it's once a month, check in, we have a party, and they're exited. Right. I mean, of course, this takes a little while. I'm talking with children on the spectrum. They're not exited right away. Of course they're not. That's not what's
and they're all different. They all have their own.
That's right. And some kids
pace.
we're coming in. We're just working on I have a kinder now. His language is amazing, but it's his social skills. So we're working on pragmatics. That's huge.
Right.
That's not a small
And people
thing.
think of speech and language, therapy as like, because you talk to my kid who's almost 13 and he he reads so much that he uses words and that he read it and because he uses it correctly, but he mispronounces it. And so I know that he read it, somewhere. And so it's amazing. And he's just a chatterbox and he's like, very, very, very smart. And, he still goes to speech because it's all about like, they play a game and it's taking turns and
it's all of that. It's
and when someone says, how are you? That he looks up and says, I'm well, how are you? Like, and not just
language is complicated.
Good, and
language is really complicated and it crosses your life and your ability to work and be a productive person and have a relationship. Language isn't just speech. I mean, I didn't know that until my kid was diagnosed with autism. I thought it was like the magic fairy bonked kids in the head and they just talked, right? Because that's what it looked like to me as an aunt and as a person out in the community. I have always said now, language is a miracle.
It truly is. I mean, that's why even teachers don't know. I mean, I get into the classrooms. We do workshops at our charter where all the teachers, I mean, they see us as, it's articulation. Even the teachers. Right. And language is just kind of like, it's just very vague, It's just like, I know you're working on, making sentences and you do the grammar thing. And just like, and it really
you're
is.
Like, I'm changing your life, teacher. One kid at a time.
But, it's the connections that they make. And it's not just about making the connection. It's about maintaining that friendship and making more friendships and giving them the skill set
reading a room and knowing what's like.
Exactly. Those
Yeah.
subtle.
This is where Jackie, because our kids were close for a handful of years together and spent a lot of time together, and Jackie would constantly compare what Kobe, who was then Jacob, was doing against.
You make it sound like he had some sort of transition. It's just a nickname.
Oh, he's Kobe. I took a long time to get calling him Kobe, but at the time he was Jacob. So our kids spent a lot of time together, and you would always compare Kobe to what Sam was doing, and you were always nervous. And I kept saying, our kids are doing the same thing. They're acting the same way. They're communicating. They're playing the same games. There wasn't an obvious, to me, distinction between the two of them. Why are you making a face?
This is just my natural face.
Oh, well, no, we would. It was hard at that time because you had a lot of insecurity. You had a lot of worry. You had a lot of concern.
Well, but I disagree that it was the same. Because like where they might be playing something, Kobe was kind of off. Even his parallel play, he was like, or his play. Say there are kids and they're talking to each other and stuff, and he's at the table, but he's not necessarily as much.
Okay, but what I'm saying to you from an outsider, because that's what you asked me to have my role be today, our kids were fine. Our kids were playing. They were laughing. They were engaging. They couldn't wait to be with each other. My son loved coming over here. There was a connection that was being made. You saw something completely different. And so what I'm saying, there was we talked about this a lot during those times, because you would say, well, Kobe's not doing this. I said, well, my son's not doing it either. And so is there a point where it is age, there's development, and you were always clarifying and quantifying it by, Kobe's on the spectrum or Kobe has autism. I'm like, but our kids are cool. Like, our kids are totally digging each other, and I understand.
But that was also my journey.
That's what I'm saying. So I'm not really having a question. It was just there were times where, there were moments where I just wanted you to just breathe and just say, look at it, enjoy it. Like, this is working, and your family and your experience. And Kobe has taught Sam so much that Sam doesn't notice. Like, my kid doesn't notice when a kid is, quote, quirky. They're like Kobe. And he understands. I mean, because we've talked about it, and you told me how to talk to Sam about autism, and that's been fantastic. But my kid doesn't notice, because they're just kids. And
well, we became friends shortly, either like right around the time he was being diagnosed officially. So while we had been doing all this early intervention, it was like I was trying on that label. Do you know what I mean? And I was obsessed with that label and autism and what it looked like, and you struggled with wanting to call it out and then not wanting anybody to know. Like, I remember, and I'm going to call you out on it, maybe you guys can speak to this, when Kobe was playing soccer. I think it was soccer. And the coach, I remember you telling the coach that he had autism, and then and being very careful that the coach paid extra attention or something, and the coach didn't. Didn't you pull him? It was the opposite.
Oh, was it the opposite? I forget.
He was on a soccer team, and he, I knew that he was only going to kind of like run and chase the ball. The fact that he wanted to play soccer and that it was hot outside, like, and if anyone's listening and they're like, what are some of the other things, like the elements, if he sees the sun and you'd think he was being burned at the stake, like it's there. Everything is times. It's that thought that like they don't feel things, or they don't. They feel it times infinity.
I always say it's turned up to 11.
Yes.
On the, it's that Spinal Tap thing. It's always on 11.
Yes.
The rest of us go up to 10, but theirs is on 11.
Yes, but we go up to 10 occasionally.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like,
right.
We have found ways to cope and keep it at a very comfortable level. We put on sunglasses or a hat, or we, turn things down, or like we're able to. And I feel like they get so caught up, and I can only speak for Kobe and some of the typical signs of autism, but they get so caught up in the moment that they don't think about the solution to fix it. Do you know what I mean? Like we would. And so you walk into a room and it's like, it's all you can do is grab your head and rock, or like you don't have that switch that says, oh, I should step out, or I should.
And I would say, and I'm going to take you out of your story for a second, but I would say that sometimes a lot of kids don't know how to do that. A lot of kids don't know how to adjust in the moment, how to take a breath. And I'm not ever going to diminish what your kids have experienced, but I'm also saying that there are also some things that I would say my kid wouldn't know how to deal with that. Like we would have to talk him through. We'd have to teach him skills. We would have to teach thing. So I think that's where it gets confusing sometimes. Like, what does it look like? How do you adjust? Because I would sit in those situations with you and I'd be like, okay, my kid is freaking out and just differently. And his brain's doing something different. Right. He's operating at a PC and Kobe's at a Mac. Like, but they're still having similar experiences and reactions to something because
maybe not outwardly.
Just not outwardly or outwardly because some
It's
kids
tough.
respond. It's like a...
It's tough because I can see it from both sides because I know I'll look at other people's kids and I'll go, they're doing great. But I know what it's like as a parent that you have all the fear and the emotion because I refer to our kids as being Swiss cheese. They have some skills, but there's holes. There's gaps. And he might be able to sit and play with your child and do something and you see that and you go, see, he's fine. But then you leave and he can't do something that your kid clearly can do.
Right.
And I don't know how, it's really hard as an autism parent because you don't want to run around going, here are the holes in my kid, right? But you see them because you're forced to. We didn't have the language developed, so we didn't, like your kid at some point just said water. You worked up to it, and he said wawa, wada, wada, and it was the miracle, and it was like, ooh, and you moved on with your life. We crawled on hot glass to get to the water, which means we had to notice every little thing and graph it and do whatever, so we don't get to be in the moment and go, oh, look, the kids are playing together. We get robbed of that to some degree. I think it can come back later on. But I think we are forced to look at every little thing, and sometimes we overact, but sometimes there's stuff that's going on that you're not there when he's having the meltdown.
No,
after
totally.
you
I mean,
leave.
listen, and again, I'm prefacing this by saying I'm not diminishing anything,
Oh,
but there were
no.
times I remember that you and I was like, my kid does the same thing. I'm going to leave here and my kid's going to do the same thing. I get what you're saying. I get it. But even this morning, I complained about something my son, that I was struggling with, that I'm really having a hard time with. And you said to me, but that's your kid. Like he's got holes. My kid doesn't have autism, but he's got holes. Like all.
Yes, we all do.
have holes. And I just want to say, thank God. But you're looking at it with different eyes.
Yeah.
So you see these two boys playing, they adore each other, they play date. I love this, that wonderful feeling. You're looking at it where you know what you're working on because you have the therapists, you have all these people coming in, okay, we're working on maintaining that topic, or is he already, he's distancing himself from the, I already know that you're looking at this play date so different than you, Kim.
Oh, she would come after me and she was like the helicopter mama. I'm like, just let them, they're cool. Like let that be natural. Finish. I interrupted you.
No, I was just going to say, I think that's it. Sometimes I go into a classroom and someone says, and this is why I love going to the classroom after a little period of time of therapy. I can't find that. Like he's blending in. He's in the mix. He's not sitting by himself, removing himself because of the sound sensitivity. It was just too much going on. He's in the mix of it. He's in the middle of it. Where is my kid? Oh, there he is. He's in the, and that's when you're on the right track. You're doing it all right. He's making the progress he's supposed to make. Right. But it didn't come naturally. Right. It didn't come like, it was a process.
And I think because I was so worried about you, because you were always so worried about me and Sam, that making sure that it wasn't awkward, and you were always so apologetic and so concerned and so like, is Sam going to be okay with this? Like, and I was just like, just let them be kids. Like they're going to react like kids do. They fight. I mean, they pull things from each other's hands because our kids were still young. They were still learning how to do that. And you were so nervous all the time that I just wanted you to like,
thank you, Xanax.
No,
But the world needs more friends like you.
I know.
Jackie taught me a lot too. I also had the benefit of working with Best Buddies for a long time. So again, I was around and I understood, and that's my background. But my son had never been around that. And so, for him, and like I said, for him, it was just Kobe. Like he knew nothing. And then we talked about what autism was and why sometimes, because he would say, how come sometimes Kobe, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, well, why do you sometimes blah, blah, blah? Oh, okay.
Yes, shame your kid. That'll do it.
No, I'm just kidding. I was normalizing because
But honestly, if we could get everybody on the same page that you are and that you are with your son, World Autism Awareness Day would be like, oh, let's wear party hats and nothing else would need to be done. Right. But there are a lot of people who don't get it the way that you do.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you a question because I know we're going to be wrapped there. I saw a commercial the other day, and it was so I'm going to back up and say when I worked at Best Buddies, the term intellectual disability, developmental disability, mental retardation, on the spectrum, all these words came up. And special needs was a big thing. Now I saw a commercial the other day that they don't want to use special needs anymore because they're just needs, and why are they extra special? Mm-hmm. So I don't know if you saw this. If not, I'm going to put it up on our face. It was beautiful. I mean, it was beautifully done.
Oh, it was the girl with Down syndrome.
Yeah,
the video.
Yeah, it was beautiful.
She doesn't have special needs,
right? But it struck me like. What is the correct term? I know we're throwing around a lot of words. We're saying spectrum a lot. Like what is the right word?
Well, and also autistic. When people say autistic,
do they have autism or are they autistic?
Yes.
Like what?
Yes.
And honestly, it really depends on their age, because I talk to Temple Grandin all the time, and she refers to herself.
Oh, we all talk to Temple Grandin all the time.
Temple's a good.
She's a good friend of mine now, and she says I'm an autistic, and in her age range, that's how they. And if you've got people that are in their 20s and 30s, they say I'm autistic, and they just say I don't have autism. It's not like a cold. I don't have autism. In my son's age range, if you say to him you're autistic, he'll go, what are you talking about? I have an autism spectrum diagnosis. I'm not autistic. And so it's
generational. That's amazing.
It totally is, because those are the words that we use during different times. And I think right now
I'm autistic adjacent is like the next one.
Exactly. I think people say on the spectrum because it is a spectrum. And we're talking about a range of people that go from geniuses that are able to have jobs but have difficulty in some area to people who need significant support. I'm personally of the mindset that we need to find new words that,
it's time.
I
think we've
Although I love the term special needs. I'm sorry, Yvonne. I didn't mean to.
No, I feel like when I say on the spectrum, because I do feel that that's the best way of describing it, because there is such a range. And, but I don't like, I wish we could come up with another better way of
I want to find a bunch of words.
Yes.
Like, because honestly, when you say that your child has autism, what comes to mind for people is their experience with autism, which is probably vastly different than what your child is. So, I wish that, we have names. It's like saying red and saying we're not going to use brick red or, all the different colors of red.
Yes,
and we're
only
only
got rid of dandelion yellow today.
What's up with that?
Crayola is dead to me.
Yeah. Right? But why are we using one word when there's a huge spectrum?
Right. Yeah. But here's the thing. More than important, I think what's more important than coming up with the right word is the fact that we're having the conversation. Yeah. And I think that what looked like, and I want to accomplish 3 things before we finish. One of them is I want people to understand that I did, and I love that you called me out, Kim, on my, there was a grief process. There was getting help was one thing, but then suddenly being my kid has autism, I went through a very dark period and I was still his advocate. I mean, that's just who I am anyway as a person. And so, and I believe that having my first of 3 children on the autism spectrum has made me a better mom to all 3 of them, because it teaches you. I mean, there's so many things I want to get done, and I know we don't have all that time because you have to be out of here, right? At 11. Yeah. So, okay.
I can be so.
Oh yeah, Kim has. Kim's saving the world. I always forget about that. But I think that
it's made you a better mom to you.
It's made me a better mom because I understand certain things, and it's made me more understanding to other people. So if we are out there and understanding of other children, whether you see tantrums or whether you see, kids who aren't looking up at you, or just don't assume that they're rude. So,
Amen.
I think that's important. But so I went through this process, but now I'm in such a different place. And I still joke that sometimes there are typical days and sometimes there are autism days with my son. And he's, but I pick him up from junior high every day, and I don't have to worry if he's actually going to make it to my car, because he used to wander. Roaming away is another thing. Like, oh my goodness. Like we would lose him I mean, I never understood the leash thing until I was like, oh, I could see using them there. But, today he doesn't sit, he doesn't have a lot of friendships as far as going out and doing things and being in sports and stuff like that. It's just not who he is. But at school, he comes in the car and he tells me about so-and-so said this, and he's in a theater class. I'm actually going today, and he is singing solos in front of the class. And like,
Wow. Can you teach my son to do those things?
But he's so, he will always have autism, but I am no longer in grief, but I am now, and Shannon, you can speak to this, in understanding and support.
Yeah.
And
acceptance. But I think for us, our kids had some intervention, and I can speak for my son. A lot of the disabling aspects of autism have diminished greatly. I don't think of my son as having a disability anymore. I want that for everybody. I want everybody to have access to the services so that they can get to that point too.
Right. Speaking of access to services, it's a nice segue.
Yeah.
So Yvonne created a product, we've referred to it a couple times, called My Little House. It is it's beautiful packaging, by the way. 8-room interactive 3D felt playhouse. So we'll put the video up on our broadcast. We'll link to it so you can see, because it's really cool what you did. But explain to us what the purpose of this is.
In a nutshell, it's a book, a felt book that opens into a 3-dimensional toy. It's a little house, and inside it's a matching. So the kids have pieces. There's 36 felt pieces that match to these line drawings. So the first thing is really it's about building their receptive language and basically seeing if make sure they have the label. There are all the early concepts in this little toy. So we have...
Wow, Kim's putting it together like a boss!
It's really... it's a wonderful interactive toy that it builds the framework for early language. So you're building their vocabulary, and then you're tapping into all the early prepositions.
People don't realize that that's a big deal when it comes to language, like under and over and inside and outside, and not the ability. I remember just some of the quirky little funky things he would say, when he was that age and didn't really understand the concepts.
Absolutely. No, and I think, we as therapists, we have all these different ways of trying to teach our kids these early prepositions and the quantitative concepts, but the most natural way is through play, not the flashcards. That's great and all, but I think for me, when you're working with little guys, the 2 to 5s, or the older kids too, it's you're playing. Now you're able to model.
And remember when we did paper dolls, like when we were little, like that was so cool. It's so simple, but so fun. And there's imaginary, like that's the other thing.
Absolutely.
Because his language started because he would do the conversations on the Cars movie, and he would be sheriff, and then he would be Lightning McQueen. And like, I started realizing, like, because he didn't understand the concept of give and take with the conversation. And so you have something like My Little House, you could pretend to be in these rooms and...
Absolutely.
Can I just say, I didn't see this until about 2 weeks ago, and I love this. I've just been raving about it. It's so smart. This is a great toy for any child. If you have just neurotypical kids, this is a great, great toy. But if you have a child who's on the autism spectrum and you're going to be doing that early intervention where you're going to be gaining language, this is a necessity. Yeah. It's the smartest thing that I've ever seen. It doesn't take up a whole lot of room in your house. It folds flat. Yep. When my kid was 3, we were told to go out and buy a dollhouse for my 3-year-old son. And we did. We spent over $100. It had a big footprint in our house. And he worked on some concepts with the dollhouse. And then he mastered those. And then there was the dollhouse. Right. And then we moved on to flashcards for a whole bunch of other things. Well, this does everything that the dollhouse and the flashcards would have done. And it folds flat. I just love it.
Yeah. So would this be something, I have a good friend of mine who's an occupational therapist. So would this be something that she would use?
Yes.
Yes, absolutely. It's the fine motor. Basically, they're matching onto the illustrations. So they have to, and we were talking about this on Shannon's show. Sometimes they don't match it exactly, but it's an approximation. They get closer and closer. So there is some nice fine motor to this. And because it's sensory, because it's felt, they really love it.
Yeah.
It's just
It's fun. I mean, I think that's the biggest part of it.
I'm going to play with it by myself. Yeah. So, well, there's a big Kickstarter campaign right now.
There is, you guys. There's this Kickstarter where we are super excited. We have another 9 days to go. So it's kind of at the tail end. You get on Kickstarter.
9 days, $9. If everyone today could just donate $9, then you would get
$90.
Oh, but let's start with 9.
Well, let's be honest though. If there's a certain amount that you could give on the Kickstarter, and then you can own your own My Little House. So if you want one, give a certain amount on the.
And you've been using this as a speech therapist. Like you had your own little like handmade slapped together.
I had my own little raggedy house that my kids. Thousands of little fingers touched, and that was it for me when it was just over and over and over again. Like the kids, they were getting a lot from it. They wanted to play with it.
Wow!
So that was really cool. Yeah, the Kickstarter. The best part of this for me is because you can get it for less than purchasing it online.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a great way to get one,
right? And get one, like if you don't have a child that age, like buy it as a gift or give it to a preschool, or there are so many ways that you do that too. If they donate a certain amount, that you'll donate.
I love that piece. I love that. That's one of our little incentives is if you don't have a child that age, your kids are older, you can donate it to preschool program in your area. Head Start program would be awesome,
right?
Or we could find a place,
right?
Because I have
they can just donate places. And let us know that you want to listen. I'm like taking ownership over this. I'm just it's very rare that I meet.
We're gonna have a hotline by the end of the
right. No, but I met you and I saw this, and one of the things that when my son was going through this early intervention and going to speech, I didn't know what to do on my own, and I would bring him and I'd sit outside with, my phone and wait for him to finish with his speech, and then like back and forth. And I don't even actually think we had the phones like we do now back then. But my point is like, I didn't know what to do. So an adult, a parent, a babysitter, a grandparent can just play. That's all you have to do.
That's right.
Take the pieces and have conversation and pretend and play.
That's it. You're
whether autism or not.
Right. You're modeling language, which is what we do with our kids when they're little. You're sitting there and you're playing, and your language, they're listening to it, and the more descriptive words you're using, they're using. Obviously, if they're on the spectrum, this is a reinforcement, really, because it's not just verbal, it's tactile, it's sensory, and it's a good size. That's the other thing. It's a really good size house. It's not a book. It's not a small house. I think the size of it really is key with my kids on the spectrum because we were talking about this.
And their parents who don't want this stuff all over the house.
Right.
Yeah, well, that too. And then it folds up into a little book. You can tuck it away on a bookshelf somewhere. But
it's amazing.
It's so smart.
And so if you go to Kickstarter, we'll also add the link to all of our channels. But you go to Kickstarter and you could just search My Little House.
So Kickstarter.com, and then you just type in My Little House. It will pop up, and check it out. SmartFeltToys.com is our website. We hopefully will, with the money we're getting from Kickstarter, I cannot wait to do My Little Farm.
My Little Farm.
I'm so excited because there's so much that can be done with language-wise with that. I can't wait. And little companion sets with pets and people that the kids can play and have little pieces that they can add to the house. If you lost a piece, then you can put like a different bed on with different shapes and colors and different attributes.
Yeah, so I'm going to be playing with this for sure.
Me too. That's what I'm sitting here.
You want to have wine and play with My Little House?
There we go. There we go. And can I say, I keep calling it Mi Casa Pequeña because I have a new family member that was just adopted from Colombia, and she's learning English. And I said, I need this for her. So we were calling it Mi Casa Pequeña.
That's fantastic. So one last thing before we go. So I had asked on Facebook for just some people to either ask questions or make comments, and that we were going to have the show. And so I wanted people to understand. So this one woman said her youngest son has autism, or said is autistic. And what I would like people to know is what they say is true. If you meet a person with autism, you've met one person with autism because it presents very differently in each individual, and that as she gets older, she loves learning how his mind works, and he has a view of life that is outside the box, and she loves that about him. So that I love that. A teacher, a general education teacher, Cynthia, shared her absolute love for kids on the spectrum and the therapists and the teachers. But a mom of a child with autism, I think he's actually grown now, Cindy, said, how do you make one understand why some people are not accepting of him because he's different? So how does she make him understand, her child, that...
It's rough.
That's a hard one.
It's rough. Just when it would depend on what the ability of the child, what their language capabilities would be, how you would language it for them. Because what you would say to somebody who has a grasp of language terms would be vastly different than somebody who maybe had language at the level of a 3-year-old. But what I would focus on is finding one skill that child could do so that they could connect with other people. And I would also focus on talking to the neurotypical kids about how we need to be accepting. It's what you did with your child, that we really need to be educating those kids about being accepting.
And I think that as a whole, it doesn't even have to be autism. We're hopefully part of the country is getting to a place where we are accepting of all different, so many different.
Say that we're all different, and I think that's the conversation we have as parents with our kids about differences. And sometimes when they're really little and they come home and they say, so and so and this different, or they say something, they're not quite, they're trying to figure it out. It's up to us to give them, that they are different, and isn't that great? Yeah. And start talking about how we're all different, each of us, not just our kids on the spectrum.
Right.
I mean, that truly is like a.
And honestly, I gotta say kudos to Sesame Street. I'm so excited about Julia
yes.
and what's happening.
And she's a redhead with blue eyes. Just
there you go. And the puppeteer is a mom with a son on the autism spectrum. Uh-huh. And I think it's going to change the next generation, how they look at being different. They're taking it on. She's debuting next week. And that might be a good thing for her to watch with her son, so that they can see from Big Bird's point of view, when Big Bird gets upset because Julia doesn't make eye contact, and Big Bird says, well, I don't think she likes me. Right. That they can watch that in a Sesame Street forum and then have a conversation about it. I think Sesame Street's going to do a lot of good. Right.
Well, we are going to add a bunch of resources also onto, definitely link to your show at Autism Live, link to My Little House and the Kickstarter campaign, but also, some of the other articles and resources I've found. Just, if you want to understand what's going on with your own child, and maybe you're not sure if that's the direction, or if you just want to understand your neighbor or your nephew or your,
And can I just say, if somebody is concerned and thinking that there's a possibility, I really want to encourage you to not be afraid. Go and find out. Yes. You might find out that your child is fine, or you might find out that your child has something that there's a whole lot of help for. But if you wait, it just gets harder and harder and harder.
And there's nothing, I think we need to get rid of that whole, something wrong with my child.
Exactly.
There's something different.
Exactly.
And let's, if there's support for that, it's so important to get it than
early.
to hide from it, because hiding is not going to make it go away.
Exactly. Early intervention is key, and early means now. Whatever age your child is, it's now.
And taking that first step is the hardest step, but after you do, it gets easier.
It does.
Yeah, and if you have any questions that for, Shannon or Yvonne or me, or you're looking for resources, you could.
I thought you were really helpful. Are you kidding me?
No, and for
You're
Kim,
amazing.
no, but I just mean if direction well today. Yeah. No, you're amazing as always. No, but I just think if you're looking for help, or from Kim, if if you could provide help for Kim, no. Email us at broadscast.com, and we will try to connect you with anyone that we feel like could be helpful. Last words there, Ms. Goldman?
I appreciate it. I appreciate that I keep hearing the word advocate and being an advocate. So I appreciate that. That's what I do in my other life. And I think it's so important. We don't always know what we need. So asking for help and then accepting the help, I think is really important. So thank you for what you do. I have a lot of friends that work in the classroom. I have a lot of moms and advocates on their own right. So I appreciate and applaud what you guys are doing, because it does make a difference our kids, because it teaches my son to be a little bit more sensitive and accepting, and it has helped broaden his mind. So I appreciate that opportunity. So there you go.
All right, Shannon and Yvonne, thank you so much. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you next time.
You are listening to BROADScast. For more from the Broads, head to BROADScast.com.